Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and today I choose once again to wade into the always fun to engage in topic of loot boxes. The reason for this is that it appears the further progress has been made by Chris Lee of Oahu, the Hawaii state legislator that has been spearheading the drive for oversight in regards to the predatory and psychologically manipulative, and those aren't just buzzwords, but we'll get into that in a moment, practices of loot boxes in video games. Now, last I heard, Chris Lee was still trying to get people on board, but I have to hand it to him, Chris works fast. If I lived in Hawaii, you could bet your ass this guy would get my vote. Now, the information we have here comes courtesy of the Hawaii Tribune Herald, and I will have a link to that article down below. In it, we find that the state of Hawaii is preparing to take the battle to the next level. A total of 4 new bills have been drafted that come at a crucial time within the gaming industry, as loot boxes infest nearly every AAA game in recent memory, and with stated plans of the AAA publishers to double down on these highly lucrative processes. The AAA publishers have all reported in their recent quarterly and end-of-year earning reports record-setting profits as a result of loot boxes and other microtransactions, or what the new industry buzzword refers to as live services, as the games themselves are apparently no longer a service. The first set of bills, House Bill 2727 and Senate Bill 3025, if passed, would require game publishers to clearly label their games that contain loot boxes and would also require these companies to disclose the probability rates of receiving each loot box reward. Now, hopefully, Chris Lee was able to learn from the mistakes made by the Chinese government in regards to Overwatch. Now, in that, Activision Blizzard was able to skirt the legal requirements there by disclosing the percentage of each tier of rewards and implement a system in the game's Chinese region to require a secondary currency to be purchased that rewarded players with loot boxes as a gift. It was a very telling move on the part of the game's publishers that they invested millions of dollars and time in order to implement a new monetary system within their game for a single country, just so they would not be forced to disclose their individual item percentages. In the other 2 bills, House Bill 2686 and Senate Bill 3024, if passed, would age-gate games that contain loot boxes to be sold to people 21 years of age and up, which is the legal gambling age in Hawaii. And I know there are a plethora of people out there that are absolutely terrified for some reason when it comes to government regulation of loot boxes, as they seem to translate it to a slippery slope or to be a regulatory platform that will encompass video games in general. But after reading the House bills, I actually think they're extremely appropriate. The first section of both bills seems to be virtually identical and read as follows. In recent years, video game publishers have begun to employ predatory mechanisms designed to exploit human psychology to compel players to keep spending money in the same way that casino games are so designed. These mechanisms allow players to purchase chances at winning rewards within games, similar to a slot machine. These predatory mechanisms, a common variety of which are known as loot boxes, can present the same psychological, addictive, and financial risks as gambling. There are even online marketplaces where players can buy and sell digital items won from loot boxes and other gambling-like mechanisms in many games, enabling players to effectively cash out their winnings. The legislator further finds that the American Psychological Association has identified internet gaming disorder as an emerging diagnosis, which warrants further study in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and the World Health Organization has identified gaming disorder, alongside gambling, as a pattern of gaming behavior, which apparently increases the risk of harmful physical or mental health effects in the latest draft of its International Compendium of Diseases. Mental health experts have raised particular concern about the exposure of youth and young adults to gambling-like mechanisms which can affect cognitive development and lead to addiction, and to which youth and young adults are particularly vulnerable. There is currently no age restriction on games, which include loot boxes and other exploitative gambling-like mechanisms. In fact, games which include these mechanisms are often marketed to youth. There is currently no disclosure required at time of purchase that video games contain predatory loot boxes and gambling-like mechanisms which may pose a harmful risk for some people, particularly youth and young adults. Further, game publishers can insert gambling-like mechanisms into games at any time with game updates without prior player or parental knowledge. Unlike casinos, there is rarely disclosure of the odds of winning items of value in loot boxes or in-game gambling-like mechanisms. There are no gaming commissions to ensure players are being treated fairly, and no exploited by gambling-like mechanisms which do not pay out as advertised. Game publishers have already begun to develop algorithms which are far more exploitative than casino games because they can now change the odds of winning valuable items in real time based on a player's reactions and likelihood of continued spending, an ability which has already been included in multiple patent applications. The legislator further finds that no meaningful protections exist to prevent consumers, and in particular vulnerable youth, from being exploited by predatory video game mechanisms which are now aggressively marketed on home computers, gaming consoles, and smartphones in people's pockets. Unlike traditional card games or other games of chance, the ubiquitous reach of video games which require active, lengthy participation and exposure to the psychological manipulation techniques of exploitative loot boxes and gambling-like mechanisms presents potentially harmful risks to the financial well-being and mental health of individuals, and especially of vulnerable youth and young adults. And in House Bill 2727, it lists subsection 481B-A, video games and probability rates disclosures, as Section A, video game publishers that distribute video games that contain a system of further purchasing. 1. A randomized reward or rewards, or 2. A consumable virtual item that can be redeemed and directly or indirectly converted to a randomized reward or rewards, shall permanently disclose and publish to the consumer the probability rates of receiving each type of randomized reward or rewards at the time of purchase and at the time any mechanism to receive a randomized reward or rewards is activated, so as to meaningfully inform the consumer's decision prior to the purchase or activation of any mechanism to receive a randomized reward or rewards. Or B, the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, in consultation with the Office of Enterprise Technology Services, is authorized to audit the code of video games sold in this state and subject to this section to ensure that the probability rates for receiving each type of randomized reward or rewards are calculated correctly and working properly. The department may contract with a third party to provide additional assistance as needed. The department shall not publicly disclose proprietary information beyond that which is necessary to fulfill the intent of this section. And that, believe it or not, is very appropriate, except that as I read that, I can see that Chris Lee might not have heard that Activision Blizzard managed to skirt around this exact same phrasing of, quote, type of reward or rewards in China by merely disclosing the drop percentages of the different tiers of rewards as opposed to the drop percentages of the individual items themselves. I think somebody might want to try and reach out to Chris Lee about that, as a matter of fact. The reason why that should happen, dear viewer, is that these companies stand to make astronomical amounts of money while delivering as little as possible and unashamedly manipulating their player base, whether it be children or adults, as there are addictive personality types in all age brackets, and it's those people that the AAAs are targeting. In the Hawaii Tribune Herald, Chris Lee was quoted as stating, "Whistleblowers have revealed that psychologists are employed to create these mechanisms." So for those of you that ever wondered if psychological manipulation and trickery were afoot, or those that didn't quite believe that's what they were doing, well, there you have it. Now, in that article, it's also stated that Chris Lee has worked with legislators from other states and countries in order to create a widespread response to predatory payment mechanisms. So far, more than half of the U.S. states are pursuing some form of loot box oversight legislation. And in this, I just have to give a big hat tip to Electronic Arts. If any company were capable of so completely screwing their customers over to such a degree that it made the U.S. state and federal government stand up and take notice and begin actively working towards legislation of loot boxes, it's EA, and they certainly did deliver. Now, I'm going to leave you all with a statement from Chris Lee that I wholeheartedly agree with, and it is a far more scathing indictment of the current gaming industry than I would be able to put in so few words, so naturally I'll have to follow them up with my own long-winded statement. Chris Lee says, "I grew up playing games my whole life. I've watched firsthand the evolution of the industry from one that seeks to create new things to one that's begun to exploit people, especially children, to maximize profit." Video gaming is a somewhat new industry in many respects, and much like the internet, the governments of the world are slow to catch up. As that is the case, these companies have had free reign within their own version of the Wild West to do as they please and manipulate their customers as they please in such a fashion that it would be illegal in virtually every other industry within the US. It wasn't too long ago that strong cases were being made for video games as art, which would be an amazing thing, especially considering the interactive and transformative nature of video games. By their very definition, a medium of interactive storytelling of such diverse and captivating potential that the world literally has not seen anything like it. A powerful tool for storytelling, for education, and for pondering larger mysteries and questions of our existence, all within a format that could promise no right or wrong answer, short of what you yourself decide to make of your own decisions and their respective outcomes and in-game repercussions. The potential to surpass even movies as not only a source of entertainment, but as a source of introspection and growth, of excitement and passion, every bit as much as it is capable of evoking emotions within the player at such a complete and visceral level, very much due to the player investment and engagement that can only come from seeing your own decisions played out. And now, thanks to the excessive greed of the AAA companies, we are left with extreme mediocrity instead. Nothing more than flashy Skinner boxes designed to promote none of those things that could elevate gaming to something singularly wonderful and utterly unique. Instead, they promote bare minimum effort. Slot machines dressed up in fancy graphics and flashing lights, microtransactions that are promoted by intentionally bad sections of game content in order to drive people to empty their wallets. Many have claimed in the past that the gaming industry was due for another crash. I disagree with that assertion, and I still do. The continual record-breaking incomes of the AAA companies shows them that their minimalistic efforts are clearly paying off, but everything that made video games great is slowly being left by the wayside. The gaming industry will not crash, but without something to fight back against the looming beast that is loot box gambling and excesses in microtransactions, gaming will transform into something else entirely, and when that day happens, something with more potential than any of us could imagine will be destroyed. Whether for a short time or forever, only time will tell. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time. If you like what I do on this channel and would like to see the channel go full-time, consider donating on Patreon or PayPal, as well as hitting that subscribe button and following me on social media. Links to everything are in the description down below.